Episode 9. The Crossing We Refused. D. 36 opened with air so clear you could count the blue gum's leaves. The ledger had written "Prepare Town Drill," and the stone seemed to lean forward, ready to be read again. We chalked the route on the ground in fat arrows. Flag cleat, north rail, east stairhead, chapel ramp lip, gate hinge, residence B grate, bright room skirting. So nobody would mistake a shortcut for a solution. Town came with clipboards and casseroles and a nervousness people hide under jokes. We didn't give them speeches, we gave them wrists. Calypso-sized bell straps for aunties and uncles as if he'd been born a quartermaster. Naledi handed out chalk to kids who had never been allowed to draw on walls. Jonas and Larato stood by the music block like reformed sinners guarding a pantry. Nay, Khumalo made the drill simple enough to remember under weather. "We don't open," she said. "We carry, we count, sun last, witness small. If you are not carrying, you stand elbows out and keep the path clear. If you want to help more, you can bring milk to hinges and lime to seams. If you want spectacle, go home." We walked it slow first, without echo. People found their places. A grandmother learned to pour a coin of milk without spilling, then taught her grandson, who learned to act as if he had been doing it all his life. A man who said he hated rules recited "not a mouth" under his breath until the words made sense in his teeth. The council clerk carried a basket and looked surprised to be useful. When the ridge turned its leaves pale, we did it for real. Thandi laid flat like a tablecloth over every bad idea. The wee knot along the flag run warmed, not sang. At 1, we bruised the cleat. At 2, the rail remembered it was a rail. At 3, the stairhead shamed fingers away. At 4, the chapel ramp lip took its milk. At 5, the gate hinge ate its coin. At 6, the residence B grate minded its manners. At 7, the bright room skirting smelled like boiled milk and iron and promise. The echo lifted onto shoulders and did what weight does when you tell it where to go. Ning. Town counted with us. They missed a beat at the chapel ramp and laughed, and the laugh did not try to be music. A boy tried to clap and met a felt patch that said, "Not a song with a patience that could teach gods." The echo rode the circle and settled into the cross brace on the wee knot the way a parcel sits on the right shelf. At the apron we set the bowl, chalked the ring, milked the hinge, and did not open anything to prove love. The river wrote good in a small ripple and nothing else. That was the pass mark. A squall shouldered the ridge in mid-afternoon, the kind of weather that convinces people they are special. Impundulu flashed along the far line like gossip with feathers. The rail did not answer. We walked the echo again, this time faster, and the town's bodies filled the path as if they'd been trained by older bones. When an uncle forgot himself and began a baritone under his breath, his sister tapped his bell strap, and the song folded away. He looked offended and then grateful. In the bright room, we took one more echo lesson, not for feelings, for technique. The rescission page lay like a mirror over the old work order. Bowl grounded, cabinet asleep, lime dry. Outside, ink only, 2, I warned, and lifted enough picture to make a hand useful. Wet reed before iron. Count 3 on the wrap. Breathe through heat, in for 3, hold for 2, out for 4. Tie outward to inward, leave no tail. It was so boring I could have cried with relief. Kwanda read with me without spending a second touch. The sun crack under his skin brightened, cooled, brightened again as if feeling for a pulse it had stopped trying to be. He didn't say thank you to air. He said, copy to work. By dusk the ridge had decided on thunder. We didn't wait for permission. Bells to wrists, drones up, milk warm, lime ready. We walked. The echo came obedient as a well-trained dog. On the second circuit, a gust slid under the music block awning to test the panel. Larato's ear, not string, smiled back from inside the case. Felt swallowed ambition. On the third, a smear at the admin pull screws suggested a hand had polished a habit into readiness weeks ago. We had painted tamper on it this morning. The purple told the truth. The hand stayed away. It is hard to sin in public when the wall writes your name. Ian. At the apron the water wrote again, and we did, and then it wrote enough, and that was enough. Night settled with the sound of people eating too fast and pretending they were fine. We placed chairs in doorways, as we do. He put his palm to my frame. I set mine to the wood. The want behaved itself. We're teaching them to carry, he said, not to admire. It's slower, I said. It lasts, he said. Copy, I said, because I'm not a poet when it matters. Morning tore clean. D35. The ledger wrote town drill passed, and then, in a hand that tries not to be proud, system ready for push. The push arrived before lunch. Inkanyamba did not show its head. It sent its body under the ridge. The light thinned, and the gutters tried to remember music. We didn't let them. We set hands to rails and milk to hinges and chalk to mouths, and walked the echo sunwise with town and students and staff, everyone counting like a language they hadn't been allowed to learn as children. At the chapel ramp lip, a child stepped aside and held her elbows out like a door that knows better. At the grate, the Tokoloshe blinked and chose dignity. At the bright room skirting, the cabinet did not so much as sigh. Then the storm changed the exam. The pressure went not for walls, but for people, for the seam between me and Kwanda, the place any lazy god would try. It pushed the echo toward our bodies as if we were cheap doors. The second touch was right there in the air, a sweet and stupid answer. He didn't reach, I didn't either. We breathed like we had been taught by a hand that will never write again. 3, 2, 4, and said the sentence that has become our floor. We will not prove love by opening. The pressure found nothing to buy. It moved on, tired of furniture. We set the echo down at the apron like a parcel and watched the river write, we for the first time with a softness that made my throat hurt. Then good. Then tomorrow. Bring what's left of him. It wasn't a voice asking for mourning. It was a ledger asking for the last receipt. Not a body, not a name. The work that hadn't been carried yet. We didn't say what we both thought. We walked back up the slope and checked the wee-knot and the rail and the stone and the hinges and the drain grids and the end caps. Because the only way through the last door is to pretend it isn't there and make a table where a mouth wants to be. That night the school smelled like hinge milk and wet dust and the inside of a toolbox. He came to my frame and we stood with our hands on wood and our throats full of boring. Wanting had learned to sit and heal and stay. Tomorrow, he said, we bring what we can carry without opening. We bring I said. He nodded, and for once no ache tried to turn itself into a song. And we slept facing the hall. The ledger wrote D34, and beneath it, the plan in a list that read like prayer. Apron, double ring, chair, sun last. Witness small, iron, milk, truth. We not present, but not bridging. Bring not's echo, not man, count. No second touches. The river kept her front door shut. The stone kept its sentences. The we-knot waited under white, and in my bones, a habit that used to be a man tapped the rim of a memory and said, without words, wet reed before iron. Outward to inward. Count with your feet. D34 arrived with air so thin the ridge looked shaved. The ledger's plan sat on the board like a contract we'd already signed. Apron, double ring, chair, sun last, witness small, iron, milk, truth. We not present but not bridging. Bring not's echo, not man, count, no second touches. We packed what a story mistakes for small things and a river knows as wealth. The we knot coiled in its crate. A short length of chain that had drunk lightning 10 years ago. A strip of wet reed wrapped in cloth. A felt baffle square from the music block. The rescission Dubé signed. The old work order stamped designate. Milk in jars, lime in a bucket, a chair. Town came without ornaments. People who used to demand spectacle stood with bell straps on wrists and elbows out, like they'd learned where to put their bodies when the world is busy. Elder Mokoena sat already, a witness who has nothing left to prove. Dube held his hat like punctuation. We made the apron into a sentence. Double ring chalked ugly. Not a mouth across the lip. Bowl upside down at north with the ground line clipped. Milk coins blooming on hinges. Drones up and bored. The wee knot laid inside the outer ring where every hand could see it and no mouth could mistake it for a bridge. The chair waited outside the ring because chairs tell pride where to sit. Ask to speak, Khumalo said. The surface lifted into skin and wrote the line that asked us to be exact. What's left of him? We didn't say a name. We said work. Receipts, Khumalo said, and we laid them down one by one like parts in a toolkit. Wet reed. Sipho unwound a single length and let it steam in the air. Busi showed the knot tied outward to inward, cross-brace so we would hold where I once had to. Thandi set flat and didn't stop. Naidu placed the short chain on a trestle, the lightning pockmark soft as old braille. Jonas held up the felt square and said, "Ear, not string," as if he needed the river to hear him promise. Doobie put the rescission in my hand without ceremony. I laid it on the west mark. It was just paper. It weighed more than people. We'll carry echo, not man, Khumalo said. Sun last, witness small. We counted our routes into the day. One at the flag cleat, lime bruised, milk at the foot. We not listening instead of singing. Kwanda's hand open, last, not first. 2 at the rail, 3 at the stairhead where do not grab had embarrassed hands into virtue. 4 at the chapel ramp lip, 5 at the gate hinge, 6 at the residence B grate. The Tokoloshe blinked and deferred. 7 at the bright room skirting where lime smelled like boiled milk and decision. And so, the echo rose like heat where the old loop used to bite the wall and sat on the wee-knot's cross-brace as if taut. No opening. No song. We walked it sunwise back to the apron and set it down inside the ring without touching the water or pretending to be beautiful. And the river asked for the part that is hardest for living throats. Say what he taught without story. We didn't make a shrine. We made a list. Wet reed before iron, I said. Count 3 on the rap, Busi said. Breathe through heat. 3, 2, 4, Kwanda said, and the thread under his skin brightened and cooled and stayed. Tie outward to inward. Leave no tail, Thandi said. Sun last, Khumalo said. Witness small. People repeated it plain, like a password to a store that sells days. The surface wrote good, and then tested the nerve that breaks schools. A pressure came down the slope with teeth in it. Old storm serpent hunger mixed with a town's wish to see a miracle before supper. It didn't go for the wall. It went for us. It pushed at the seam between my jaw and his wrist, that cheap door any lazy god would try. The second touch lived right there in the air, dressed as help. We declined in the language we've taught our bones. Flat held, milk shown, lime bit, elbows out made a corridor of people. 3, 2, 4 filled chests with fences. The wee knot took the nudge and turned it into weight without teeth. We did not open. The skin wrote one word as if it had been waiting to mean it. We. Then, with the careful hand of a clerk, the ledger in water finished the account. Now, designates hold closed. Keep the work. Release the story. Stone stands. We knot at Festival 7 rains. No song until your count ends. Sun last. Witness small. Not a mouth. We didn't bow. We did what furniture does at the end of a sermon. We stood up and made room for tomorrow. Doobie took off his hat and sat in the chair the way a man sits at last light after a long field. He didn't cry. He allowed his face to be read. Receipts, he said, which was as close to thank you as policy needs. On the slope, Children began to learn a superstition that works. If you whisper wet reed before iron into your sleeve before tests, your hands behave. We let it happen. That's how culture survives boredom. And back in the bright room, we put the parts away like people who meant to use them again. Bowl grounded, lime stripe clean, cabinet asleep under paint with no ache to be interesting. The rescission and the work order tucked together in the truth folder like a pair of tools stored sharp. The ledger wrote with the little pomp it allows itself. Account settled. Designate. Echo retained as technique. Voice declined. We walk the anchors because that's how endings are kept from turning into mouths. Flag cleat bruised, rail bored, stair head rude, ramp lip polite with milk, gate hinge fed, great-minded, skirting stubborn, drones looped like saints inventing yawns. Evening turned the stone the color of tea. Town drifted past and read the lines without needing chaperones. A boy in sun traced the blank margin and said, "We will not prove love by opening in that distracted way people talk to their bracelets." In the music block, Lorato wrote lullaby later on a chalkboard and drew a box around it like hope planted in winter. I took my chair to my doorway. He came and set his palm to the frame. I matched mine an inch away through wood. The rule was an animal that had learned to sit and stay and wait for permission it would never be given. "It's done," he said. He didn't mean the storm. He didn't mean the town. He meant the part of history that kept chewing the same corner of his life. "Eta." "It's working," I said, "because I've learned to replace poetry with receipts when it matters." He breathed in for 3, held for 2, out for 4. It had become a habit, not a trick. "Copy," he said, and the wanting in my chest did the strangest thing. It turned into a place to rest. "Rule holds," I said. "Rule holds," he said. We slept facing the hall. The ledger wrote D33, and underneath, count continues. Town trained, designate cleared, system holds. The river kept her front door shut. The wee knot cooled under its lime stripe and forgot how to be interesting. The stone remembered for us, and for the first time since we started counting, the ridge turned its leaves toward night like a person turning down a bed. The day after felt like a room that had finally aired out. D33 wrote itself on the board in Khumalo's small hand, and the stone looked older again. My favorite kind of miracle. We still did our loop because habit is the only bragging we allow. Milk at hinges, lime at seams, bells to wrists, drones up and board. The wee knot lay under its white stripe like a tendon, confident enough to be quiet. Town wandered through with casseroles that had learned to be receipts. A boy from water leaned his shoulder against the admin wall and mouthed the litany with his eyes closed. Not like a prayer, but like a locker code you don't want to forget. No one tried a note. When a tourist stopped at the hose cupboard to take a picture of not a mouth, Lorato slid into his frame, rested her finger on the label, "No songs, D33, and the man lowered his phone as if he'd been asked to remove his hat. Culture is manners wearing overalls. And by noon, the first human error arrived dressed as kindness. A parent group rolled in a small generator and a freezer chest for a "you've kept us safe" ice cream stall. The gen set purred at exactly the frequency the building loves to remember. Kids began to line up. The gutters perked. Nandi 1's streamer tugged toward the music block like a dog finding an old scent. Boosie didn't shout. She chalked a ring around the generator and wrote "not a song" across the fuel cap. Thandi dropped flat a half hair. Jonas tore a felt baffle in half, taped it over the freezer vents, then lifted his hands and said to the parent, "Ear, not string." The woman looked stricken, then brave. She unplugged the thing. "We'll serve while it sweats," she said, and the quad learned a new verb for love, facet. We logged a rule we didn't know we needed. No motors at 400 hertz on school grounds. Ear permits by Naidu. Naidu nodded like a man who has always wanted to be a licensing authority. Oui, D. 32 came with wind that smelled like metal and apology. The news reached us with the dignity of gossip. A senior had smuggled a Bluetooth speaker into the arts block to prove recorded music isn't music. He played a choir file, tinny and nostalgic. The wall heard shape, not source. A seam near the practice room vent lifted like a lip. Nandi 2's bell gave one neat chime. We didn't write a sermon. We did the drill. Ring chalked ugly at the threshold. Milk on the vent screws. Flat until the air remembered its lane. I set my mouth cheap and kept my jaw in my pocket. Kwanda set a mug where a snap would love a shin. The file played 3 bars and then died. Battery, mercy, both. The boy tried to look brave and managed only young. Outcomes, receipts, no theater, device surrendered. Work detail with Calypso for a fortnight, posters duty with Lorato, room ethics with Nandi. The page titled Recordings Are Still Mouths circled in thick pen. He signed the board copy with a hand that shook once and didn't again. We added a rule beneath the motor one. No recorded song on campus during count. Ear, not string. Lorato tacked it straight and made the corner square with the level until the world exhaled. Done. The ridge tried to revive its bad influence that night. Thunder crawled its ribs and looked down at us, the way old gods do when they want applause. We walked the echo sunwise, counted, didn't open. At the chapel ramp, Lip and Ant reached for a harmony and bumped her bell strap with her elbow like a professional. She winked at her grandson, and he mouthed, "Later." Lullaby. Later chalked in the music block window earned a small crowd and no sound. D31 gave us something like peace. The clerk returned to formalize the lullaby plan. Thandi wrote day 50 courtyard lullabies, only chairs off-ground bell wrists for fun. You could feel the school ease around those words like a stiff shoulder warming. The museum woman came back with wax and patience and showed 3 first years how to dress the stone ahead of rain. They worked like they were frosting a cake that might save them. We walked the echo at dusk. The pressure tried for us and found fences. 3, 2, 4, elbows out. We not absorbing nudge, turning it into weight. At the apron, the water wrote we again, smaller. The way a ledger appends a line it's already satisfied with. On D30, a different error came, the kind with a necktie. A man from council asked for one symbolic opening, with safety, to show reconciliation. He rehearsed his phrases in the quad like a man practicing grief in a mirror. Khumalo handed him the stone by way of answer. She ran her finger under "We will not prove love by opening," and then under council lied. School corrected. "We open for work," she said. "For people and pipes and paint and mourning. We do not open for symbol." He tried again. She pointed him toward a chalk bucket and a hose cupboard. He drew not a mouth, with letters that looked surprisingly tender. By D. 29 people had begun to count without us telling them to. The choir parents formed a volunteer quiet brand and stood at the chapel ramp between classes like ushers with their palms out, not blocking, inviting elbows to remember themselves. They were good at it because they had spent a lifetime telling people where to stand. It was only a new script. We took the echo for its loops in sun and shadow. At the residence B grate, the Tokoloshe left safety pins on the brick in exchange for crumbs. Sifo wore one on his collar like a medal and wrote "thank you" in tiny letters again. Small economies keep big ones honest. In D28 and D27 fell into a rhythm people could nap to. We walked, counted, didn't open. We taught, sewed, waxed, filed, straightened. The music block felt baffles held. The gym bleachers felt tag not a song, developed a smudge where hands kept meeting the sentence and agreeing. In the bright room, the echo lessons had dwindled to maintenance. We weren't pulling pictures for pain anymore. We were checking a toolbox. Wet reed before iron. Count 3. Breathe 3, 2, 4. Tie outward to inward, leave no tail. The ledger wrote technique retained, not a mouth. Kwanda stood beside me and read scars without nostalgia. He breathed the count when his arm itched, out of habit now, I sometimes matched him without thinking. Muscle memory is a kind of friendship. The one oddity, because story doesn't believe in perfect weeks, came on D26 when a boy in sun and a girl in earth stood too long under the fig with their beads off, listening to each other's breath. The air held its decision like a cat deciding whether to jump. Calypso appeared as if conjured, lifted both bell cuffs like an altar boy, and the pair, blushing, guilty, salvageable, let him tie their wrists. We logged near miss with a smiley face Nandi pretended not to see, and the building learned another way to survive teenagers. Sasset. By D25, the town had begun to behave like a place that intends to last. The councilman came back without a speech, and helped Nayidu paint not a mouth on the crawlspace hatch above the music room, steady hand, no lecture. Dubé visited with a tin of polish he did not use. He sat by the stone like a man sitting by a river he finally trusts not to eat his house. He read, "Son Master Zulu designate," and didn't try to add a sentence. That restraint felt like a public holiday. We kept our doors open with chairs we could sit in. That has become my measure for whether a rule is true. Can you rest your weight on it? In my doorway, he put his palm to the frame once, as always. I matched it. The wood remembered us. The ache behaved. Sometimes he breathed 324, and I felt the house breathe with him. On D24, the ridge scowled and then softened, like a teacher deciding whether to hand back a test with a joke. The river sent a ripple that wrote later in the spillway slack, and 3 first years cheered and then apologized to their bell straps instinctively. Khumalo circled day 50 on the board in red and added chairs and blankets and lullabies only. Lorato sketched a seating plan like a woman designing a safer city. D23 to D21 were a sewing seam. Nothing dramatic. We walked the Echo in the morning and at dusk. We trained a new squad on milk coins. We caught a boy polishing a door pull out of boredom and redirected him to posters where his itch could save us all. We found a cracked drain grate before it remembered it had teeth and bolted it down with tamper paint and satisfaction. Somewhere inside those days, the building began to hum the way fridges hum. Honest, unromantic, constant. You can live a life by that kind of sound. On die 20, the ledger started ending its lines with the same 3 words. Rule holds. It never got bored of writing them. Neither did we of earning them. The we not slept under its stripe as if it had always lived there. The stone weathered like a face you trust with children. The music block did not try to be a throat. The gym bleachers felt bad, survived a soccer celebration, and came out smug again. The hose cupboard sign got chalked, washed by rain, and chalked again by a child who didn't even look at us to check if it was allowed. I took my chair to my doorway that night and sat while the hall cooled. He came, palm to frame, the one touch. We stood, and the wand worked like a hinge we'd oiled, moving with limits on purpose. We're going to make it, he said, not triumphant, tired in the good way. We're going to be bored, I said, and meant benediction. He breathed 3-2-4 once, for himself, or for the room, or for a man who had left work behind like a map. Copy, he said. Rule holds, I said. Rule holds, he said. The ledger wrote D19, and beneath it, town lullaby plan filed. Final week drills, day 50 chairs fetched. The river kept her front door shut. The campus smelled of milk, lime, felt, and iron. Ingredients for a life. But we not forgot it had ever been an argument. The stone remembered for us so we wouldn't tempt ourselves by remembering wrong. And somewhere under all of that, in the clean space where stories try to set their traps, the thing that is not a trap waited. A field of chairs in a courtyard, wrists with bells on them for joy and not law, a count that would end without a choir tearing the roof off, and a pair of hands that would stay where they were supposed to. His on the frame, mine on the other side of the grain, because we had chosen to call that restraint by its correct name. Love. Ins. D. 19 slid into D18 without trying to be special. We kept our loop, town kept theirs. The museum woman taught a cousin how to wax letters. The cousin taught a first year. The first year taught her brother by drawing the strokes in the dust with a stick. That's how you make eternity out of 10 minutes. A man with a microphone showed up at lunchtime hoping to interview the stone. Lorato intercepted him with a level in one hand and a poster in the other. No recorded song on campus during count, she said, tapping the rules she'd printed. Your mic hums at 400. If you want to help, carry milk. He did, awkwardly, and the quad decided that was the good ending for his story. Now, the we not lay under its stripe like a tendon you forget until you need to lift. Nandy 1's streamer barely twitched. Nandy 2 looped the gate with the patience of a taxi rank queue. When the ridge turned a leaf pale, we walked the echo sunwise. Count, elbows out, sun last, witness small. At the apron, the water wrote. We as if it enjoyed repeating itself. Ew. D17 brought clever weather. A wind that knew how to curl under awnings and a drizzle that wanted to find cracks. We had already signed our answers into the day. Felt inside panels, lime on seams, milk coins on hinges. A boy from water, small, quick, already 50% wrist bell, ran ahead of us chalking not a mouth on every end cap that flirted with the drizzle. He wore pride like a sweater. Caletzo added him to the bell wrists roster with a tick that sounded like a promise. Evening taught us a new ritual we didn't know we needed. A grandmother with a headscarf stopped in front of the stone, put her palm on the blank margin, and counted 3, 2, 4 out loud as if teaching a baby to nap. People around her did it too, without making a scene. Breathing became a kind of public service. D16 tried to buy us with a remembrance. A past pupil arrived, eyes glossy, and said, one hymn, just the first verse, for the old days. Khumalo pointed at the board where the river's text lives, and then at the stone where it lives again. No song 50 days. The pupil read it, sighed, and stayed to help Naidu weld a lip on a backstage door instead. Ear, not string, Jonas told him, and the man's laugh found humility. In the bright room, we took what might be the last echo lesson inside walls. Not for yearning, for maintenance. Bowl grounded, lime stripe clean, cabinet asleep. We set the rescission atop the work order, and I warned my mouth. Outside, ink only, too. The paper gave back what it always gives back when we ask correctly. A list. Wet reed before iron. Count 3. Breathe 3, 2, 4. Tie outward to inward. Leave no tail. It's the kind of romance you can build a country on. Kwanda stood beside me with his palm a handspan off the table, his forearm thread brightening, cooling, obeying. He didn't reach for me. He reached for policy. Copy, he said, and the room liked him for telling the truth. Ought. D. 15 was our first full day where nothing tried to be a mouth. People would have missed the drama if their hands hadn't been so busy. The choir parents ran a stall that sold silence like cake. Tea poured without clink, biscuits given with elbows out of the path, a jar where kids wrote lullaby titles on slips of paper for day 50. The jar filled without noise. Lullaby, later chalked in the music block window, became a map to a future everybody could afford. That night, the ridge considered thunder and then went to bed like a responsible adult. We took our chairs to our thresholds anyway, because love is also a routine. His palm to my frame, mine to the other side of the wood. The wanting kept learning. Sit, stay, good. We watched the hall breathe and didn't try to make it beautiful. Feels like we're holding a door closed, he said. We're building a corridor, I said. Different muscles. He breathed 3, 2, 4, and so did the house. Yanha, D14 to D12 were seam days. We walked the echo at dawn and dusk. Elbows out, count steady. Sun last, witness small. The stone took wax and dried darker. Grooves drank shadow. Faces passed and read and moved on a little taller. The gym bleachers felt tag not a song, survived a burst of victory when the suns beat the moons at 5 aside. The felt smelled faintly of sweat and policy, which is exactly the campus's perfume now. And a small failure arrived dressed like helpfulness. A prefect printed the litany on fancy paper and taped it over the stone to protect it from fingerprints. Lorato untaped it, folded it once, handed it back, and chalked not a mouth on the sticky tape shadow the way some people write amen. "Stones are for touching," she said, and the prefect took the correction into her ribs where it belonged. D11 brought a wedding at the town hall. The procession spilled through the gates to take photos at the quad. The bride touched the blank margin with her veil and closed her eyes, and the veil did not try to be a song. The photographer asked for a chorus. The bride said, "Later, it'll be sweeter." We wrote culture, learning on the board because sometimes you get to brag. That evening, the ridge finally produced a proper tantrum. Inkanyamba moved along the far line with all the style of a rumor wearing a good coat. We didn't offer it a soundtrack. Drones up, streamers board, lime where lime loves to live. Milk coins gleaming like rule. We walked the echo with town bodies filling the route. Children at the stair, head elbows out. Aunties at the gate, uncles at the rail, students at the cleat. The pressure tried for our seam again, cheap as a pickup line. 324 made fences out of lungs. We will not prove love by opening turned the urge into furniture. We set the echo down at the apron like a parcel, and the water wrote we with a dot that felt like a smile you don't put in minutes. Hints. D10 arrived with a smell like the first page of a new exercise book. The ledger put a box around day 50 and wrote chairs. Blankets next to it, then, because it has a sense of humor now. Biscuits. Quiet. We rehearsed placing chairs in the courtyard so that aisles made sense to weather and wheelchairs both. Naledi measured distances with string. Naidu checked the temporary stage feet and muttered satisfied things. Jonas adjusted one last felt baffle without ceremony. Lorato pinned lullaby. Later in 3 languages and didn't let the corners slant. And we did get one last test in human form, because the world likes fairness more than neatness. A young son with too much wrist and not enough patience tried to gift the campus a moment. He climbed the admin steps at lunch, cleared his throat, and began, The bell on his wrist kissed his skin. A dozen kids tapped theirs back without looking at him, like rain refusing to be hail. He laughed, ashamed and saved, and jumped down. Calypso pressed a bell strap into his palm. "Hold this for me," and the boy held it for an hour like a penance with a handle. D, 9 to D. 7 tightened the screws on peace. We walked, counted, didn't open. Someone started chalking tiny "not a mouth" on the backs of their hands before exams. Soon, half a class had the words there, and no one wrote them neatly, which pleased Boosie in a way she didn't admit. On D6, the museum woman taught us how to make rain covers for the stone. Waxed canvas that ties under the base without turning the block into a wrapped present. "You want it to breathe," she said. "Not sweat." We practiced on the lawn until even the impatient among us were good at knots that would hold through weather and yield to hands. Outward to inward. Leave no tail. D5 was nearly rude with calm. The ridge dozed upright. The we not forgot it had ever been an argument and became rope all the way down. In the bright room, the cabinet slept like a dog who knows it will be fed. The ledger wrote D5 and left space beneath as if saving room for a story we have decided not to write. That night, at Thresholds, the want lay down between us and stayed. He leaned his forehead against the top of the frame for a second longer than usual, bone to wood, breath to quiet, and pulled away before seconds learned a bad habit. "After the count," he said, not question, not threat. "With law," I said, not coy, not brave, correct. D4, town brought blankets. D3, a choir parent made a roster that listed who will hold themselves together during the lullabies, and it read like love, bragging about what it had learned. DT2, we chalked a last not a mouth on the chapel ramp cap because end caps are needy, and Boosie loves to bully them into good behavior. Yeah. D1. The school smelled like biscuits and iron. We walked the Echo at dawn and didn't need to at dusk because the weather sat in a chair all by itself. The stone had its canvas, tied right. The courtyard had its chairs, set true. The board in the quad carried the only words a place like this needs the night before a ritual. Day 50 tomorrow. Courtyard lullabies only off-ground chairs. Blankets bell wrists for fun. We will not prove love by opening. Sun last, witness small, not a mouth. Walk Echo at dawn, final. We took our chairs to our thresholds like always. He placed his palm on the frame once. I matched it on the other side. We didn't need to speak. We had taught the house to breathe for us. The ledger turned its own page and wrote Day 50 in a hand so careful it looked like a stitched seam. Under it, smaller. Begin with lullaby. End with rule. The river kept her front door shut and hummed the honest way concrete hums when it has decided to be useful. The we-not lay still. The stone remembered. The campus, our stubborn, boring, saved campus, slept in the shape of a place that knows what to do next.